Hi again, welcome to China Manufacturing Decoded, episode 109. This time, Adrian from the Sofeast team here, joined by our CEO, Renaud. Renaud, hi again.
Hi, and hi everybody. Yeah, how's it going?
Yes, good. I'm just enjoying the summer over here in the UK. It's nice to have some nice sunshine and some decent weather. And of course, I think very, very different to summer in South China.
Oh, yeah. South China now is the start of the long, painful season where it's warm and humid, and either it's raining very heavily or it gets super hot. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at least you're not in an area of China where there are lots of lockdowns and things like that going on. That would be even less fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, poor, maybe some people who listen are in that situation, and that's maddening. I mean, I don't know how to say it.
Yeah. Well, I hope it comes to an end soon. That's all I can say. We were talking off air before we started the episode, like here in the UK, there are now, it's almost not even spoken about anymore. There's nothing. So I think maybe it's still good to be careful, but I think you got to try and find a way to move on with normal life now, I suppose.
Yeah, if you're far away from China or Taiwan or Hong Kong or North Korea, one of these countries where it's still a pretty serious thing. Yeah, it's people are getting back to their lives, of course. Yeah, but here it's like, I don't know. It's, we're hung up on some, to 2020 and not moving forward. So anyway, let's wait and see. Let's see how it gets unlocked.
Yeah, I've heard rumors of some changes in the pipeline, which could be positive, but until we see, more evidence of changes, I don't think we can talk about it right now. But we do periodically cover COVID and what's going on in Asia and China specifically. So when we've got more news on that, we will cover it, but not today. Today, we're talking about visibility in your supply chain. So supply chains around the world are coming under increasing scrutiny. I'm sure you'd agree, Renaud, and especially in certain sensitive areas, such as parts of China. So having transparency over who's in your supply chain, where they are, and what they're using in terms of materials, perhaps as well, is even more important for importers today than before. So I'd like to get from you today how you think it's possible to get more visibility over your supply chain, even, a number of levels down from your main supplier.
Right. Well, big topic and not always easy. But we hear more and more about that, and for good reason. And we will keep hearing more and more about it, I think. Having transparency in the supply chain means, in simple terms, that, if you buy a product, a machine to make bread, for example, okay, let's take a simple example that people can sort of imagine. So there are these bread making machines, and so it gets assembled somewhere. Let's say it gets assembled in Ningbo. But in most cases, and especially if you go into the showroom and you of a supplier in Ningbo or on the Alibaba page and say, I want this model, you're not going to get any further than that. You will not know, where the plastic casing comes from and where the PCBA and the specific components come from, the charger and the cable, the various internal elements, etc.
Right.
You will not know all of that. And that means you don't have transparency into your supply chain. And in some cases, you don't even know where it's assembled. Now, that's the worst case. That's, let's say, level 0 of transparency is that you just know you have a supplier, ABC Trading Company, and you buy from them, and you've never been to the factory, you've never had the opportunity to send your own representatives to check the factory or anything, right? That's level 0. And this is going to be less and less acceptable. And as a bit of background, there are regulations. So in the US, there's something about not importing, not putting any product on the US markets that has been made with involvement of slavery, or let's say or forced labor from involving people from Xinjiang province in Western China. And that might mean that that little piece of rare metal that go into the battery or something was mined in Xinjiang, or the cotton that goes into the garment is harvested over there. It could also mean it's made in that facility that maybe uses cheap labor from that province, and that facility maybe is in Hunan province or somewhere far away, right? So there's a lot of it's very wide, and if for some reason Customs and Border Control in the US have a suspicion and they request the details, and as the importer, all you can say is, well, I buy it from that company over there, and that's what I know. Okay, so you say it's made in Ningbo. Have you been to the factory in Ningbo? Do you have factory a factory visit report with photos? Do you have some videos of them making your product? No. Then you're gonna how to say, this is not going to be good. This is not going to be good. And in the EU, there are also various countries have certain regulations, right? So UK has something about modern slavery. Germany has something about also forced labor and environmental management in the supply chain that's coming up next year. Various countries have certain regulations, but there's going to be European-wide regulations about supply chain transparency when it comes to social compliance, forced labor, and others, but also for what they call eco-design, and that will, eco-design and sustainability, and they would require a lot of transparency. Okay, so this is going to be more and more critical, and it's going to become a matter of compliance, actually, right? So it's moving from nice to have to must have, right? So that we're going to hear more and more about that.
Interesting, yeah, and it's such a huge topic, as you say, and it's becoming a real issue. That example that you give about the US border and customs, I mean, the burden of proof is on you, isn't it? It's on you, the importer, and the questions they might be asking you, maybe it's almost impossible to answer them if you haven't got much more information than you're accustomed to getting about where stuff's coming from. Yeah,
exactly. If you don't know, well, it means actually that you are totally open to the possibility of something bad happening, and you don't care. That's the way they're gonna see it if and when they start to enforce it seriously. And there's a lot of question marks around that. However, on the European Union side, it's not a matter of if, it's not even a matter of when. Some of these things are coming up in 2023, and it's all written down. It's all available on the internet. It's a matter of, in the small details, what exactly are they going to require, and what exactly will be visible to whom, and how are they going to enforce it. It's like the small details are not all confirmed, but a lot of the the meat of the regulations are out there on the internet, right? And one might be a regulation, one might just be a directive, right? But if one of these is a quote unquote regulation, then it's going to instantly become law in all 27 countries. and that becomes much more serious. And just to go a little bit deeper into this, at one point, nearly all hard goods sold in the EU will need to have a product passport, a digital product passport that will be like a QR code or barcode or something on the labeling or on the packaging of the product. And people would be able to scan it and see, some information at the point of sale, which makes it easier then for market surveillance authorities and all kinds of people to get all kinds of information. And if they have access to large parts of the technical file, well, they're going to see the names of the name of the factory, etc., etc. So,
wow,
it's going to force transparency also, to a certain extent, at least to the tier one supplier.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fascinating and a little bit scary as well. I thinking of the ramifications for many importers.
Yeah, some of them will not be happy. I mean, I talked to a few of them and they're up in arms, but let's see. There certainly is a lot of lobbying against that, but let's see where it goes.
Okay, so you mentioned an example of goods getting impounded at the border, for example. Are there any other examples you can give of clients we've worked with over the years who have actually had issues caused by not having a good amount of visibility over their supply chain?
Well, I might say that at least 30% of the problems in China come from that.
Wow.
It would be a very long list, but one that comes back so often is about surface treatment. So you have a product with a metal part, and you need it to have some kind of surface treatment, such as electroplating or PVD coating or anodizing or something like that. And this is highly polluting, and usually the assembly factory or even the factory that made the metal part in the first place do not do it in-house. They outsource that. But when they found the way to get it made nicely with a nice finish that the customer wants, well, they consider it sort of as a business secret. They don't want anybody to know, especially not their customer, where that job is done. And that means they basically they hide that information. And then when, let's say they do plating somewhere, and then they, for whatever reason, they change to another plating company, well, they're not going to tell anybody because anyway, only they know where it's plated. And then you have, poor finishing on half of the products, or maybe it looks the same, but it's a slightly different alloy, and suddenly, that kind of nickel alloy, well, maybe doesn't stand well with perspiration, so if it's often in contact with the skin, there's going to be a major issue with reliability of the product. After 3 months or 6 months, it's going to start to look really bad when the old one was okay. And then everybody's scratching their heads, what happened? Well, that's because you don't know what's going on in your supply chain. You don't keep tabs over who does what, right? So, and that's just one example, but there's so many.
Do you think it's more likely that Asian suppliers would try to obscure information? Is there a reason why that might happen?
So I would not say Asian. It's definitely a thing with the Chinese. That's for sure. I mean, the way they do their business dealings in general, anyway, is not very open, right? It's kind of opaque, and they like that opacity. And you can't. There's a lot of information that's not available in China, and sometimes it's even forbidden to do certain types of due diligence. You might go to jail. So there's a lack of transparency. I mean, ask any accounting auditors, what they think about the books of publicly listed companies in New York City or in Hong Kong, and they will tell you, right? So it's definitely a thing with the Chinese. It's less of an issue with most other countries, but if I try to trace it back to something, I guess it's got to be with this notion that the network, the personal network, is extremely valuable. And why would I tell you who I work with and so on? This has taken me 20 years, to develop this network. So you deal with me, and that's it. And then you can benefit from my network, but don't try to go around me or something, because I found this thanks to my network, right? Whereas a more a less Chinese approach, I would say. I don't say more Western or something, because we're bundling so many countries together. But an opposite approach would be, well, there's some work that goes into researching these people and confirming that they're okay. There's a process to follow, and there's value in that. So maybe, Mr. Customer, you have to pay for that work. But then since you paid for it, you own the deliverables, you know who it is, right? You have the information. And that's the way we work. But that's the way we push our clients. When we see that a lack of transparency will be a major source of risk for them, and it pretty much always is, that you get to do all the work at the beginning to identify and qualify proper suppliers, of components, of surface treatment, and so on, and obviously for assembly, packaging, and testing. But then it's your information, it's your supply chain, you own it, and you have visibility. And when you have an issue, you can send people straight to the source of the problem, rather than, hey, we have a problem with with the PCBA. Can we go to the place? We're working with the PCBA guys. Don't worry, we're gonna solve it. Okay, give me an update. Yeah. Oh, we're working on it. Oh, it should be fine. What did you do? We did a little something. Blah 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 blah. Okay, tell me more details. It's complicated, but don't worry, it's fixed. Okay, and what happens is, next time you have the same problem, or 2 batches later or something. So that's the situation, and it really flows out of the this Chinese thinking that who is so valuable, and is really it defines who you are and what you can offer, right? And it's your network and nobody else's network, and so on. Which is why, by the way, LinkedIn was never that popular in China anyway, because people would not link up to all of their direct real life connections, and actually, basically tell LinkedIn and tell everybody in the world, these are my connections. To them, it's sort of private information, right? Highly valuable.
Wow,
but
interesting.
In the US, is the opposite. It would be, hey, let's share, and let's get to know people, and I help you meet somebody, and you will help me meet somebody later who can help me. But whatever, let's share. Let's be open about this, right?
Okay.
So,
yeah, that's very illuminating. Interesting that it's quite a specific thing then for China. And you started talking about some of the issues caused by lack of transparency, and that was going to be my next question, actually. So some of the drawbacks that will definitely be exhibited when you've got a supply chain that you just don't have visibility over. I guess you were talking about some of the the lack of communication from suppliers, and the lack of control over what's going on. But let's go through them one by one in terms of drawbacks then.
Right. So the first thing is, you're going to have surprises. Stuff's going to happen that you just didn't foresee. right? Because you can't, if you don't have visibility, you don't have control. And you cannot even really do a proper risk analysis. Right? So a lot of people talked about all the changes that Ford and Toyota and some others did when there were massive floods in Thailand in when was it, 2011? And then again, when there was the tsunami and the nuclear, let's say, alert. It was an accident. Okay, in Japan, all right. A lot of big groups said, okay, it's not possible. We didn't even know there were components made over there, and then suddenly our supply gets stopped for 6 weeks. That's just not possible, right? When you don't have continuity of supply, your entire business grinds to a halt. I mean, it's true, obviously, for a car assembly factory. They basically have to stop the plant. But so many importers, what do they tell their own customers? Hey, sorry, I don't have it. What do you mean you don't have it? You're supposed to always have some inventory, blah, blah, blah. No, I don't have it, and I don't even know when it's going to be back up. Are you kidding me? Right? So you can lose a lot of business like this, and you can get massive penalties also. So you get surprised because you don't know. And for example, when in 2020, when Wuhan and a lot of areas around Wuhan were completely locked down, a lot of people said, oh, do I have something in my supply chain that's in Hubei or in that general area? And a lot of people said, I don't know. And they were asking their suppliers, their suppliers, it's funny because their suppliers will know if their own suppliers are somewhere, but they would not know the suppliers of their suppliers because everybody's hiding everything all along the supply chain, right? So if you have not done the job of uncovering this information in advance, it's too late. You're not going to get all the information you need in a timely manner. So you have a serious risk of breakdown of the supply chain, and you will not see it coming, right? Another one, and that's a big motivator for certain companies, is the risk of bad PR. So remember in Bangladesh when what is it called, the Tazreen factory burned, and they found some Walmart labels in there. I mean, Walmart Canada nearly crushed the importer that they were working with over that, and the importer didn't even know that it was made in that Tazreen factory, which burned, and it was horrific, right? And then same thing, the Rana Plaza, it was a large area with a lot of some floors were large cutting and sewing workshops, and it crumbles. A lot of people died. Again, it's horrific. And then I can tell you a lot of apparel buyers started to sweat bullets because they had no clue if they had some of their production in there. Right? So what happens is that they were buying through some of these buying agents, sort of trading companies. In Bangladesh is very common. And they would say, okay, it's made in this factory, but last minute this factory maybe is too busy or reconsiders, is no longer interested, and then they put it in another factory. Or they give it to that factory, factory A, which actually subcontracts half of the production to factory B. And this is so common, right? And this is also extremely common in China. I'm talking about Bangladesh, but it might be more common in China. Yeah. Because again, it's sort of their culture for some reason.
It's who you know, yeah.
Yeah, it's who you know, and why would you care about where it's made as long as the result is good and that. And anyway, you want it all made in 4 weeks. 200,000 pieces. How you want us to do it? We don't have the capacity anyway. Just let me handle. It will be fine. Okay, right? This is the mentality of a lot of these Chinese entrepreneurs who who manage these factories. So serious risk of bad image if, I don't know, you have your logo on a soccer ball that is getting sewn by hand by a kid in Pakistan, and somebody happens to take a photo of it, right?
Yeah.
That's really bad. So you need to have control over the supply chain. And again, if you don't have visibility, you don't have control. A major one, obviously, is potential quality issues. And I already alluded to it with the example with plating, but there's so many of them. Because the thing is, if you don't have visibility, your supplier will think, it's my supply chain, right? Like you're renting their supply chain and they're in charge, they're in the driver's seat and they do kind of what they want. And you don't know because, again, no visibility, no control. And if, I don't know, if they used to be sourcing a certain kind of polymer for a part of the product, and then that kind of polymer gets a bit more expensive. Well, there's this other polymer, it's a bit cheaper, and it looks just the same. So let's just use that one. Right? Or, the design of the PCBA is a bit of a pain, and maybe we don't want that component, and just we have a lot of waste that we need to rework in SMT. Okay, let's change the design a little bit, or let's change this component, and then suddenly, in this specific mode, this specific situation, boom, the battery completely fails, and and it shuts down and everything. How come? How come? They're not going to tell you they made the change, right? So you're trying to understand the root cause of it, and you have no clue. So if it's...
I guess even if the product works and cosmetically it looks as it should, if the authorities that be find out, that's a non-compliant product right there, and it's still going to be you left carrying the can, isn't it?
Yeah. So the thing is, in most cases, the supplier is not dumb, They do it in a way that it's not very likely to be picked up by the quality inspections. And then they're going to get paid in full by the time it's shipped out. And then who cares after that? And usually the issues come up in the form of reliability issues, of complaints from potential customers that the product stopped working, or, the battery got drained and never recharged, or something after 10 cycles, or there's a bunch of like weird issues that are going to start to come up. And by the time the how to say, there's no longer any smoke, you don't know where the fire started. It's pretty messy, right? And that's why, as a side note, that's why a lot of companies, especially in electrical and electronic products, do ongoing reliability testing on every product batch. They do a screening, some samples, and they check them more or less in depth. And in that way, they actually catch some of this, let's say, unforeseen variation.
Yeah.
And it's much better to catch it when some products have just been assembled, nothing's been shipped out yet, much better at this stage than after shipment, after arrival in the importing country, and so on. Much better for the buyer. So quality is a major source of risk here when you don't have visibility and you don't have control.
Yeah.
And obviously, serious quality issues will trigger also serious delays, right? So it's and maybe expedited shipments and so on, which in turn happen to be serious cost issues, and all the more so if the quality issues actually happened in the field, or in the hands of users. That becomes extremely expensive.
And PR issues as well. If journalists catch on that you're doing a lot of air freight these days, I can't imagine that reflects well on companies if that ends up in the press.
That could be, yeah. I haven't seen instances of this recently, but yeah, you're you have a good point, yeah. And also by not having visibility, so let's say you buy products and then your supplier buys the components and so on. So in this whole supply chain, maybe there's an enormous amount of inventory. And if you knew about it, then you would say, okay, we're safe. We don't need to carry so much inventory because anyway, right now at this point in time, they have a lot of extra inventory anyway, ready to go. So they will be reactive. There's a lower risk of discontinuity of the supply chain. Or maybe you might see, well, these guys don't carry any inventory of any of that. They will have to do a new batch when I order. So the lead times are likely to be longer. So I should order earlier and keep more inventory on my side. Right? This is just a one example, but there's many types of inefficiencies that can come up when you don't have visibility.
Scary stuff, and a lot of food for thought there. I guess whoever's listening is going to be thinking, "Oh man, this is really bad." Then, and rightly so. However, there's a takeaway in this episode, and that is you're going to go through some of the best practices that will help anyone listening to get more visibility over their supply chain, right?
Yeah. So obviously, if you're a tiny company, the situation is quite different from that of a very large company.
Yeah.
Now, there are basically two situations. One is you develop your own product. Well, if you develop your own product, it's actually not usually, it's usually not that much more work to do some extra sourcing work on your side. And there are a lot of companies that can help you with that. Basically identify some suppliers and then help you qualify them. It actually doesn't take that much extra effort usually to do that job on your side. And then, you're still going to have one supplier that's going to be responsible for the finished product. But just by having qualified at least the critical component suppliers, the critical ones, the most important, those that are likely to have an issue, those that are, that's expensive components, maybe more complex, and so on. So, for example, in the bread making machine, it would be the plastic casing, especially if it's custom designed anyway. It would be the PCBA. It would be maybe one or two other things, right? Maybe the display. There's a big display, maybe. That might be one. So you, at least for this one, you really these critical components, you can do some of the work and have all this information, and then you tell your supplier that's going to do the assembly, packing, testing, etc. This is who you work with. This is who you buy from. These are their prices, MOQ, lead time, etc. And you keep the bill of material open to me. You don't start to play games, right? Now, there's the opposite case where you don't buy you don't develop a new product. It's more like you go into a showroom and you say, well, this I don't know, this knife or this display. I like it. I just want to buy this one, but maybe make the casing in a new color, put my logo on it, and here's the packaging. Well, most of the product is not yours. You're just going to resell an existing product. So then it becomes much, much, much harder to know. However, if you're going to buy decent quantities, you might be able to negotiate for some level of transparency. But really, if it's in China, it might be very hard. In some other countries, it might be easier. In places like India, Vietnam, or Thailand, and so on, it's more about on a case-by-case basis who you work with, right? And maybe they do a lot of this in-house. So if you work with a company that's vertically integrated, does a lot of things in-house, well, you know where a lot of the stuff is made, right? So you have more visibility actually over your supply chain in that case. but it's always going to be a thorny issue right here. But at least, already working directly with a manufacturer that you confirmed as a manufacturer and not as a trading company is already a step in the right direction if you want more visibility into your supply chain. And I understand some people are listening to this and are in effect a trading company, and they might provide that information about what factory is going to do the job to their buyers. So, okay, fine. I have no problem against this type of trading company. Now, you definitely, to get back to that, if you're a huge company, you're going to say, okay, I want all this information. You send it to us or we don't do business, right?
Yeah.
And you might even say, I need to see the financials of the company. I need to know how many people work on it, how much they're paid, blah, 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 right? There's no limit to what they might ask. If you're not a huge company, that's not the way it works. So having said all that, there's certain policies. You absolutely need to have a manufacturing contract that makes it absolutely forbidden to do certain things, right? So for example, if there are certain suppliers that are approved, there's no change of supplier without your authorization. And that's valid for the assembly place also. No subcontracting without authorization. Now, how are you going to police that? Obviously, you need to have a right to send your representatives or someone from an auditing agency to check the production with minimal advance notice. Okay. Also, processes. No change in any of the manufacturing or testing processes without your authorization. This sounds sort of basic and pretty obvious, but there's been so many cases where a relatively unsophisticated manufacturer made some changes without advising the buyer, and then poof, it leads to huge issues, right?
Yeah.
So these are the real, the big, the most beneficial pieces of advice I would give if you want best practices to ensure a certain level of transparency and control over the supply chain.
Yeah, and I think this fits in well with so many of the things that we've spoken about already. Manufacturing agreements, and we spoke recently about your quality standard. That definitely comes into this as well, doesn't it? So, yes. I know Andrew, head of new product development. He's going to be so pleased that you talked about ongoing reliability testing. That's a good one to think about as well. But that's a good way to end it. So, how do you obtain that visibility? It's something that we do a lot of as well. So in the show notes, I will share some links to some of the solutions that we've got on Sofeast.com that you can have a look at if you do need that sort of assistance on the ground in China, Vietnam, India, and other Asian countries. But yeah, it's a really helpful one today, Renaud. Thanks.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.